afternoon, everyone. It's me, Char Nolan, a team member of the chef instructional team here at Rouxbe. And today is a first because today we have a guest with us. And I will tell you everything you need to know about my friend, fellow Rouxbe student, and also a wonderful, wonderful author and an innovator in the plant-based movement. And today we have our special guest, Cathy Katin-Grazzini. And Cathy, if you can hop on for a couple of seconds and just sort of say hello to everyone and let them know that you're here and maybe give us a little greeting, and then we'll jump into some Rouxbe business, and then we'll get back to talking about your beautiful books and what Ann Esselstyn has to say about the way that you present your material and other things like that. So here we have Cathy.
Thank you, Char. I'm so delighted to be here. It's an honor really close to my heart because my Rouxbe experience was so fundamental to the whole path that I've taken ever since. It was so much fun and so liberating. I'm Cathy Katin-Grazzini, for those of you that don't know me. I'm a sustainable chef and make eco-friendly recipes and super healthy, whole food, plant-based, no oil, no salt, no sugar recipes, and cookbook author, and just foodie in general. So I'm delighted to be here with you.
Well, thank you, Cathy. That's so delightful to hear. And before we move on, Cathy, because you mentioned that you were a sustainable chef and author, I would love for you to hold up your books and let everybody know their names, because I think that your books have made a wonderful footprint into the arena of whole food, plant-based, etc. And as I have shared with you before, Ann Esselstyn loves your books. And if Ann Esselstyn loves your books and gives her thumbprint of approval, what more would you ever want? But let's see the books that you have to show us today.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm a big fan of the Esselstyns as well, and Jane. You know, the whole kit and caboodle are, Essie and everybody, just so pivotal to our own journey in the plant-based, path that we have taken since, 10 or 11 years ago. This is my latest book. This one came out just a couple of months ago. It's called Love the Foods That Love the Planet. And it's really to help educate people, not just vegans, but everybody, to how to eat for the planet in the healthiest of ways, but in the most sustainable of ways. So this one, published by HCI Books, a wonderful publisher that it was really a delight to work with. And we can talk about publishing cookbooks if that's of interest to anybody, any of our students out there. And my previous book, which you might see on the mantle next to this one, is Love the Foods That Love You Back, which came out in 2022. Rizzoli was the publisher. And that one is focused mostly on the health benefits of eating a whole food, plant-based diet. Yeah, some differences, nuances, but if we're eating for the planet, we're eating plants, and that's the main takeaway, with some nuances there with how to do it most sustainably.
And one of the many wonderful things about Cathy's book and her writing style is that her recipes are well written and easy to understand. But my goodness, the photography in the book is absolutely outstanding and beautiful. And Cathy, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your photographer.
Yeah, well, near and dear to my heart, my photographer is my husband, Giordano. Yeah, we have so much fun doing what we do. So in this current book, let's see if I can just, it's a very visual book. A lot of the recipes are 2-page spreads. Yeah, our routine is that, I cook something that I'm excited about. A lot of my recipes are global influenced. It's one of my favorite things to do. I'm such a fan of the rich culinary traditions from all over the world, and I just tweak them to be greener and cleaner, so that they're really best for the planet, best for our health. Then we have a setup where we, with his camera and light boxes and all the other things, we start staging and work together through the whole photography and editing process till we get it just the way we want it. So that's our process. So which is, it's a great joy, because we do a lot of things together, and this is one of our favorite things to do together. So, yes.
And when you're finished with your food photography, do you already then have dinner made?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Do I?
When your photography is finished, do you have dinner with the food that you've
Oh, yes,
photographed?
indeed. Yes, it's undoubtedly what we're eating that night. Sure.
It's sort of like the Rouxbe student experience, because students will often say that they get to eat their homework, or that they shared their homework with whomever they live with. Or the best part is that, according to my 12-year-old, this dish was, and then they will tell you what their 12-year-old thought about the dish, which I always find very endearing. Um, Thank you so much, Cathy. And we will get into a little bit more about the book. I did want to take care of a couple of Rouxbe-isms before we go into our questions for today. The first one is, I'm not sure when the cutoff point is, as I've said, for Happy New Year, but Happy New Year. And on a more serious note, because we do have students all over the globe, to anyone whose life has been affected by the California fires, I'm sure all of us have a friend or a relative or a colleague that you've heard from. So they are in our positive thoughts, and we wish everyone well. And it was just, I have a friend who had to evacuate for a week, and she describes it as the most harrowing thing of her life. And she's a physician who still had to do telehealth with her patients across the country. So there are just incredible stories. And I think that there's just a lot that needs to be done, and we can keep everybody in a positive light. Two things about today is still get a lot of questions about which pan to use when you're doing the no oil saute. And I say this: go to a thrift shop and purchase a $3 or $4 stainless steel pan that's still in good condition. I have gone to thrift shops and gotten all-clad pans for $4. So rather than investing in a stainless steel pot collection, go to a thrift shop, save a couple of monies, and then develop the skill of doing the no oil saute in a stainless steel pan. You'll see a big difference in the actual saute, in the mahogany color that you develop through caramelization. So that's my one thing. And then the other thing that I get a lot of emails about is photos, about taking food photos and using, what kind of light should I use? And I'm hoping in a little bit, maybe Cathy can help to answer this. But when I was a Rouxbe student, I would make my food at night, but then I would photograph it the next day. I would go out on my porch where there was beautiful direct light, and I would bring a tablecloth or a table drape or a placemat or whatever, and I would set the photography up, and then I would take my photos. And that natural light really enhances every aspect of the beautiful food that you've made. Remember that we are an online learning institution, and that your photos speak volumes in the work that you have done. So good photos make the assignment. And I was showing this to Cathy before we started, and I have it over here. This is a, oops, let me, stronger than I know. This is a neck tripod, well, not a tripod, but a neck camera holder, and you put it around your neck, and your camera goes in here, and you can really see your photos from a much broader range. And then you look into the camera, and if you have that little clicker, it takes beautiful pictures. They're about $20. I enjoy using it. I take a lot of food photos for different projects that I work on. And I just kind of feel as though I can use both of my hands to move things around, and it just makes things a lot easier. I believe I got it on Amazon. I'm not sure, but it was a very, very good investment, and I enjoy using it. So good photos, stainless steel pot and pan. You will find today that I have listed a couple of websites. One is for Cathy's Prescription Kitchen, and the other one is for an event that Jane Esselstyn is having that is virtual on Saturday, March the 8th. And the reason why I posted it is because I get a lot of emails from students who say that they find things that are vegan and they find things that are plant-based, but they don't find things that are specific to whole food, plant-based, no oil. So check out the conference. It's really, really fun. Jane and her mom, and they've got an incredible roster of speakers, including Dr. Christy Funk, Dr. Ann Bingham, and just a wonderful array of different topics to enjoy from the comfort of your own kitchen or your study or wherever you want to be. So, Cathy, I have some questions. Some of them are for me, some of them are for you, some of them are for the both of us. So I'm going to look at the questions, and it's good to see so many faces here today. And of course, at the top of the list, who is joining us today is our dear friend, Fran Costigan. We know Fran as the director of Vegan Pastry, Essential Vegan Desserts. And she's thanking us for the important work that we do in making it accessible and delicious. And Cathy, is there anything that you'd like to add to Fran's lovely comment?
Oh, I just to say hi to Fran. She also was someone that I worked with when I was with Veg World, and near and dear. So I'm so delighted that she's here, and the beautiful desserts that she does are incomparable. So I'm honored that she joined us today. That's really phenomenal.
I know she had a busy day today, so I really appreciate having Fran here today. And if you don't know who Fran Costigan is, for anyone tuning in, she's the director of our Essential Vegan Desserts program. It is a plant-based gateway to learning how to bake beautiful foods without using conventional animal-based products. So definitely check it out. I can say that she gives 150% attention to all of her students, many of whom have gone on to write beautiful books, open delicious bakeries, and other things like that. And she lives in Philadelphia, so what could be better? Thanks, friend. We appreciate that. Cathy, this is a question for you, and it's from Melissa, and she's wanting to know what have you found to be effective in getting clients for each of the things that you are involved with, like cooking classes, lifestyle counseling, and corporate employee wellness programs?
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa, for that question. That's really pertinent, especially for Rouxbe grads and anybody working in this sphere that wants to have an impact on their communities. I guess I would say it really depends where you live and the kind of community that you work in. I'm here in Connecticut, really chilly Connecticut today, I might say. And Connecticut is peppered with a couple of cities, but mostly we're small towns. And so what I have found, well, maybe this applies even to bigger cities. It's really a question of networking, getting to know the people in your area and getting your name about. When you hang out your shingle and begin to want to start cooking, get certified. It depends what it is that you want to do, but whether it's through Rouxbe and cooking classes, and if you want to do that work in your community, or if you're working with clients with lifestyle changes for health or for the environment or for any other purpose, or even employee wellness programs that I've done as well, it's there are different programs, whether it's the T. Colin Campbell program with plant-based nutrition certification, or Neil Barnard's Food for Life training, or there's so many wonderful opportunities in the whole food plant-based world, if that's what you're interested in as well. And that's helpful just to broaden your background and to lend credibility to what you do. And then start with giving a talk, things for free in the library, or in local churches or schools, or see what's available, the local Y, or Parks and Rec. Depends what you have in your neighborhood, so that people come to see you, know what you're about, know what you offer. There may be programs to do a cooking series if you want to do cooking classes. I'm doing, since COVID, I haven't been doing quite as many I used to do regular cooking classes, even with the permission of the health department in my town, out of my kitchen. I don't do that right now, but I work with our Visiting Nurses Association with a cooking series that I'm going to be doing for them. And there are opportunities all over once you start building a name for yourself and a reputation, and then people, word of mouth and treating people right and helping them is just takes on a life of its own, and that's how you can grow your business.
Those are wonderful, wonderful responses and some very good seeds for planting a business or a career. Or, when I was a student at Rouxbe, I never thought that it would become the trajectory for a new sort of career for myself, but that's what happened, and what a great thing. And Melissa also has a part B, which she has addressed pretty much the same thing. Would I share some thoughts regarding nutrition and cooking related information with others? And so it goes. And I was thinking about this earlier today because when I first finished my Rouxbe, I thought, well, what am I going to do? Because a part of me wanted to be like a caterer and cater for people all over who wanted to eat whole food, plant-based, no oil. That's a very small niche of a population, because I find that even though some people want to eat that way, there's a certain comfort in their own lifestyle that might make it difficult for them to go to the other side. But when I finished Rouxbe, there was a thing on TV about the Free Library of Philadelphia, which is a 4-story, beautiful, block-long institution. On the 4th floor, they had just put in a hotel kitchen, and that you could do banquets there. And they were also looking for instructors. So I sent a handwritten note to the director and told her what my name was. And I didn't give her a resume. I just sent a warm note. And she called me back and she said, well, this sounds interesting. We don't have a need for this right now. And you have to stop the clock and remember that 10 years ago, the words plant-based were sort of strange words, that it didn't kind of click with people, because people still wanted to learn how to make the perfect burger or whatever. So she invited me to teach a class, and we call it the Big House in the City. And I had a ton of fun, and that kitchen was wonderful, and it had everything in it that you would ever want. But then she said, we have at 3 of our libraries, we have a Charlie cart, and you've heard me speak about the Charlie cart, which is a kitchen on wheels. It weighs 600 pounds as a cart, but it has everything that you need, from a Breville oven to a Vitamix to all-clad pots and pans and so forth and so on. And I fell in love with the Charlie cart because I felt as though every class that I taught had extreme purpose, because the attendees were people from the community, many of whom were retired, many of whom had lifestyle-related diseases. And maybe you've heard me say before that the South Philadelphia Library is on the 1st floor of a building, and the 2nd and 3rd floors are primary care clinics, one for adults, one for children. So physicians were able to refer students to come to my classes. And here we are, I think 8 years later, and my classes sell out. They're offered free. We write a lot of grants to get funding for them. So I think, to Cathy's point, is that you start out working as a volunteer. I would love to come and teach this class for you. And then all of a sudden you realize that you have a following, and then that following takes you to other parts of the globe. This past summer, I did a cooking session at Rip Esselstyn's Plant Strong retreat from this kitchen, from this very spot, and had such a wonderful time. So I think that it's being true to yourself, not compromising your own values, whatever arena you choose to practice, and just having a lot of fun. And I'm going to just tell you this one little thing, Melissa. A few Saturdays ago, I taught a class on making soup. Now, soup for some people is delicious and wonderful, but for many people who might have hypertension, how do you make a delicious tasting soup that isn't laden with so much sodium? And one of my participants walked in, and I hadn't seen her since last summer. And she had a plethora of illnesses, and her diabetes was out of control. And when she came into the class, she started to weep because she said, these classes help me stay on track. I don't know why, but when I come to these classes, I always start to feel better. So when I hear that, it says to me that there is a need for whole food plant-based, no matter what kind of population you're working in, because I travel around a little bit, but I think it's being true to your own values and really more than anything else, loving exactly what you do. So I think Cathy and I probably share some very similar ideals. And I also think that Rouxbe helped to plant a really incredible foundation for sort of going after what you wanted to do. I love reading students' assignments, and I love seeing their zeal and excitement. And maybe you've seen that graph where how do you measure success? And some people think it's a straight rocket arrow, but in reality, it's just a bunch of curves and curves and curves that keep on going. So, Melissa, you can certainly head to Cathy's website if you have any questions, and you can always reach out to me here at rubychar@rouxbe.com. You have the website for the Charlie cart, because you know I love the Charlie cart, and you have the website for Jane Esselstyn's event. And our next question, I'm going to shoot to you first, Cathy, because I think we both like garlic a lot. And this is from Hilda. And Hilda is asking, can a person eat too much garlic? I've read in many articles that garlic can help keep blood pressure in check. Can you address this belief, please? You go first, Kath.
Well, I don't think you can eat too much garlic. The only warning I would say is if you eat it raw, you may, the people who are around you might object, but from a health perspective, it's just one of the healthiest things you can eat. I love, I mostly use cooked garlic, I have to say, unless it's rubbed on toast and sprinkled with thyme leaves as a garnish, type of fadunta without olive oil. So there I'll use some raw garlic, but for the most point, I'm either, using it in soups or sautés or whatever. And I also love to roast, dry roast whole whole heads of garlic, which mellows it out tremendously. And there you can use it in all sorts of ways. As in canopies and so many other things, as of just in spreads and on layers, if you're stacking different vegetables with different sauces and so forth. But roasted garlic just becomes a very gentle, mild, and wonderfully aromatic tool in the tool chest. But yeah, I've never heard of too much garlic as being all things in balance. You don't want to only eat garlic, but using it in a culinary fashion, I think you're safe to go.
I have to agree with Cathy 100%. I will say that if you are buying garlic, you want to buy a bulb that still has remnants of its dried leaves, because some garlic is imported from other countries where it has been bleached, and that bottom part has been shaved off. If you ever have the chance to visit Gilroy, California, the garlic capital of the world, I say that is a fun thing to do. I love garlic, and last week at my soup class, we made a Tuscan bean soup that had 6 cloves of garlic. And everyone in the class was worried about trying to keep the vampires away. They were all making fun jokes. But when they tasted the final product, which was layered at the end with lemon juice, they were all amazed that there was no salt in the dish. So garlic is the flavor powerhouse for good dishes. And also, I'm suggesting not to buy the little jar of garlic that you often see in the produce department because it has preservatives and added sodium to it. So it totally, totally takes away from the essence and true flavor of garlic. So go with the fresh stuff. And also, I see many grocery stores have those plastic bags that are filled with peeled garlic. Once you open that bag, it seems to disintegrate pretty quickly, even if it's stored well in your refrigerator. So enjoy the garlic, Hilda, and eat as much as you want. So that was a great question. We always love the garlic question. Cathy, this is another wonderful question for you. This is from Denise T. Good afternoon, Denise. She is very excited about your cookbooks and she would like for you to tell everyone about them. She's excited about getting one, and thank you so much for being here today. So, you've got two beautiful books. In a little while, I have a few questions about the process, but talk about the books. Tell us why you wrote.
Oh, okay. Well, I had been accumulating so many recipes since we really um, started our own plant-based journey, which was provoked by a health crisis that my husband had actually in 2013. So, and that changing our lifestyle was just so spectacular for our own health prospects and for my child as well, my son, that we never looked back. But after many, many years and having fun just writing up these recipes, having Giordano photograph them and so forth, I realized that we had probably, hundreds, and probably there was a book in there somewhere. And I was just very fortunate to be introduced to a book agent in my area who was excited about the prospect and took me on as a client, and the rest sort of was history. We came up with a proposal for Love the Foods That Love You Back, and it was picked up by Rouxbe, which was a great honor. And this book was, as I said, it was mostly on the part of my mission, I have to say, apart from the health and the environment and all of that, is really related to home cooking. Because so many people have hung up their aprons and are so seduced by the appeal of convenience foods, eating out, taking out, and so forth. And it's just it's not only a shame from a cultural and social point of view, but from a health perspective and from an environmental perspective, it's very, very problematic. So part of part of my mission is to entice people back into their kitchens at whatever age. And this is aligned so closely with Ruby's mission as well, is to empower the home cook to make really beautiful food that's so healthful and in so many ways as well. So so that was the first cookbook. It differs a little bit. That, let's see, I'm trying to think of the recipes in that cookbook. You'll find recipes for gnocchi, lots of my husband's from Florence, Italy. He lived there for years, so it's not just Italian recipes. There are recipes from many places as well, other than Europe. But there's just a ton of recipes as well that are really, really fun, great home cooking inspired by the beautiful home traditions from Japan and from Scandinavia and from West Africa and all over. And the new cookbook is, follows in that vein. But what's different about this cookbook is, I think what I was inspired to do is after a couple of years, and it was pretty much promotion for the first book was beginning to wind down a little bit. I had just become so concerned about the state of the climate. And the worsening, we see it in LA right now, but, whether it's hurricanes or it's not just this country, of course, it's a global phenomenon. And because global cooking is so near and dear to my heart. Just watching the devastation to people's lives and livelihoods and the decimation of wildlife, I just wanted to really understand the issue. And I just, for my own personal edification, took myself to school and really did sort of as deep a dive as I was able to do on my own, reading studies and trying to really understand the science behind the warming climate. And was there anything we can do? Because I don't know if you have encountered this, but when I talk to people about the climate, just family, friends, people, casually, the response that I typically get is, people sort of glaze over and they say, oh, it's so overwhelming. It's so depressing. I don't know what I can do. And they kind of disengage. And in fact, the most impactful thing, when I discovered as I was doing all this research for the book, was the most impactful thing that we can do as individuals to mitigate climate change, to lower our individual climate footprint, starts with our forks. It's what we do in our kitchens. It's the most powerful thing of all the things we can do, from electrifying our appliances, from solar power, from EV vehicles, from not flying internationally as much as we might want to, and all the other things that we can do to lower our use of fossil fuels. What we eat has the biggest impact by a long shot. And so it was a message I just felt was so compelling, and people don't know. And even people who are concerned about the environment are not eating this way. It's just was so shocking to me that I felt I had to put it in a book. And every recipe has climate footprint information for a key ingredient in that recipe, so people can really begin to understand what's driving emissions for any commodity, any food that we're eating. And there's all sorts of other specific information about the country of origin, if it's a foreign inspired dish, or how to source different ingredients, or who are the climate heroes in the plant-based kingdom that are more resilient and that we need to be eating more of, even as plant-based people, because our agriculture is really under assault now. 90% of and I'll get off my platform here in a second, but 90% of crop failures is because of extreme weather. So I'm just so passionate about this; it gets me very excited. But that was my motivation for writing the second book, because it was, people need hope and they need to know that they are empowered. This is an easy thing for us all to do, is just to shift in the right direction, lean into plants if we're not already there. And if we are already there, with some fine tuning so that we're really eating the most sustainably, to really help our farmers, help agriculture, reduce scarcity and all the rest of it. Sorry.
I'm going to give you a big brava for that one, and encourage everyone again to visit Cathy's Prescription Kitchen for more information. And Cathy, I did want to say that from your first cookbook, I love the banana bread with blueberries. That's a really good recipe, because when you've got bananas hanging around that most people wouldn't want to touch, that they're always good for a banana bread, banana muffin, yonanas, or whatever. And I think that, I've been plant-based for more than 15 years. And 15 years ago, there weren't any vegan, plant-based convenience foods. And so you really had to put a lot of time and energy into choosing your produce and what kind of plant milk you were going to use. And maybe back in that time, there were only one or two that were available. Fast forward to today, where many, many big corporations have monetized on the plant-based movement. These are foods that are mass-produced in gigantic factories, and they're packaged in horrible packaging with plastic and all kinds of things. Rarely do you see one that is packaged in something that's biodegradable or whatever. And it's just interesting to see how the movement has gone from, I'm going to strip some kale and I'm going to make a burger from some beans. And a couple of months ago, Fran Costigan had on one of the co-founders of Burlap and Barrel, the spice company. And what I love about using their spices is that it will say single origin, and explaining single origin to someone might seem foreign, but then you can sort of see, brain cells popping together of what that exactly means, not being in plastic, but being in glass, little things like that. So, Denise, I think that you need to follow Cathy and see what other wonderful advice she has to give based on her values that reflect her innermost thoughts, which I think is absolutely wonderful. We're going to move on to Mark R., and I know that name very, very well. And Mark has expanded his duties in the kitchen since taking the plant-based cooking class, and he's looking for advice with essential cooking equipment and what he should have, and he's looking for things by brand name. I'm going to give my top three, and then Cathy, you can give your top three, and even if they're the same, that's okay. So first, Mark, you need to have a good knife. And my favorite knife right now is I forget its name and it's staring at me on the other side of the room. I can send you that name later, but you need a good knife. You need to sharpen that knife well, and you need to keep it in pristine condition, because without a good knife and a cutting board that also provides the proper everything that you need. So the knife, sharpener, and your cutting board all come together. You need to have a really, really good pan or set of pans. As some of you may know, right now I'm using a brand called Caraway, which were gifted to me. And they are a super, super ceramic pan, and you don't need one drop of oil. But even when you make the no oil saute mushroom recipe, they caramelize beautifully. The garlic doesn't burn, and they work really, really well. I have the big saucepan, and I also have Caraway sheet pans, which I also like, and they have cut down on using parchment paper because nothing sticks to them. So there's that. And then the third thing, and maybe you can see it behind me, but I have a Vitamix, and I cherish my Vitamix because it really helps to make beautiful sauces and gravies without any oil, and delicious soups. And I will tell you that this machine behind me, I had purchased it at Dr. Joel Furman's office when he had an office here in New Jersey. And in his office, he had a little store. And so I thought, well, I'm going to buy my Vitamix from a doctor because it'll even be better. And one night I did something to it, and there on the back of the machine, they give you an 800 number. And I called the number at 10:50 p.m. And the person on the other end of the phone said, "Good evening. Thank you very much for calling Vitamix. This is Jane speaking." And I was like, "Jane, where am I calling you?" And she said, "Oh, you're calling the factory, which is located in Cleveland, Ohio." And then she had me take the receiver of the phone, and she told me to turn on my motor. And then she said, "Okay, I know what it is. I'm going to send you a replacement part. And when the replacement part comes, I'll help you insert it." So I was sold on a Vitamix from that very moment. So Vitamix, knife, and a good set of pans. How about you, Cathy?
Well, those are all great suggestions, and yeah, of course, a knife is first and foremost on anybody's list. And I loved Ruby's knife skills chapter. I think of all the things. Well, there were so many things, but that was just getting really comfortable. Safely using your knife. It's an extension of your hand, really, and it makes your life so much easier when you're breaking down produce in prodigious amounts. Let's see what else. Stainless pans, ceramic pans, great for any nonstick if you're making pancakes or flatbreads or other things that would, ordinarily stick is a great way to go. I have, again, there are nice to haves and needs to haves, so on the to haves, depending on one's budget, and you can shop sales as well if budget is an issue. It's really great to have a good food processor. I actually mix a lot of my doughs in my food processor. I have a Breville. It's a workhorse. The thing is a beast. And I've had it for many, many years. And that's great when you're using, when you're making denser batters or even doughs, as I said. I don't use it for breaking down produce so much, unless I'm making a slaw of some sort. Then it's a real time saver. And instead of a Vitamix, I had the same problem where I kept breaking my Vitamixes. I don't know what I was doing, but after two of them that I had to send back, I decided, well, my needs were just two in my household right now. I went a little bit smaller, and I got a Breville. I don't even remember what the model is called, but it's a somewhat smaller high-speed blender. But blenders are really phenomenal for sauces, primarily. I use it all the time, when I'm making either a vegetable sauce or a sweet sauce, from fruit, or date paste or sweetening paste of other dried fruits or whatever it is. That's really comes in handy. Over the years, as I grew as a chef and my needs and so forth, I've invested in I have a convection oven air fryer. That's not a need to have, but it's a nice to have when when you're not cooking with oil and you really want to brown certain vegetables and so forth. And tofu, I make my tofu nuggets all the time, and other things. It's nice to have even a separate oven if you have other things going on in the oven, to have this small other oven, if you don't have a second oven, which I don't. Um, and then I have things still on my wish list that I haven't gotten, but that's for another conversation, I think.
I'm kind of chuckling, Cathy, and I'll tell you why. The Vitamix company has a very good refurb sell program where you can buy a refurbished Vitamix for $199, and you'll still get a warranty with it. And I've always wondered who owned this machine before, and now I know who. It was you. So,
Probably.
but Mark, I think that these are all very good ideas. And it is exciting. I'm a big fan of your work. So it's exciting to see you wanting to sort of expand your kitchen with some extra small appliances, utensils, et cetera, et cetera. And Mark has another question about sauteing multiple veggies. Are there consistent guidelines with type of vegetables to prioritize putting in a pan first, or which ones to cook longer than others? So the answer is yes, based on a couple of things. One is based on the water content of the vegetable. So we know, for example, and you've learned this in your classes, that garlic is a very low water vegetable, and that's why it burns very quickly. But we know that zucchini has a ton of water in it, and it cooks very quickly. So it depends on the vegetable, the cut, and the heat of the pan, those three things. I personally cook each vegetable separately because I want them to have a lovely caramelization to them. And then at the end, for about 2 minutes, I'll put them in the pan together and then turn the flame down a bit and then have them sort of engage with one another. Cathy, what do you do in the same instance?
Yeah, I agree with you with garlic for sure. Yeah, it really depends what we're making. I almost always start with onion, just because it caramelizes so beautifully, and then I deglaze that pan with a little bit of liquid of whatever, depending on what the dish is, and if there's an international influence, that would guide me in terms of what kind of liquid I'm using. And then, but sometimes I start with a sofrito, like an Italian sofrito. I just start, if I'm making a soup, I will sweat the vegetables instead of sauteing them to caramelize. So lower flame, gentler, with the carrots, celery, and onion. Or if it's a Latin American dish, it would be peppers, instead, that we'd be adding, instead of the carrots, perhaps. And then after deglazing, I would add the garlic and then start adding in whatever other vegetables are made in the dish. That's sort of my process for most things. But again, there's so much variation depending on a dish.
Mirepoix has to be just right, and cooking the onions first is always a good go-to, and then adding your carrots and your diced celery as well. Always fun to do. So, the other thing I just wanted to say to Mark is a lot of cooking is really based on instinct and what you think is the best thing to do. And sometimes our instinct is not right, and you learn from what didn't work, and then you just keep improving and practicing and going, on and on. But everything is in the cut. We're going to move on to Victoria M. Victoria has been on previously, and last month we were talking about using a tube for peeling a clove of garlic, and it works really, really well. And that was her experience. So I'm glad that worked for you. I go through about 2 bulbs of garlic a week. So I don't have the patience to peel each piece of garlic, but rolling it in, you can use a piece of rubber, you can use a piece of cardboard, or you can go buy a fancy garlic roller at Home Goods or whatever. But I'm glad that that worked for you. And that's a fun thing to hear. Thank you. This next question is from Gail M. And who has a whole food, plant-based, no oil cooking book for people moving into senior complexes where the kitchen and storage might be much smaller? So that's a really great question. And sometimes when we do that hospital assignment, when I review it, I always say that the perfect place for a Rouxbe graduate to be is either in a hospital or in a retirement community to educate the culinary team that's presently there. But if you're looking for my favorite whole food, plant-based, no oil cookbook is written by Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr., Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And at the end of the book, without any pictures, are 150 recipes by Ann Crile Esselstyn. And these recipes were published in 2009. And since that time, Anne has worked with Jane. But that book is really good because the ingredients are very simple. They're ingredients from 2009, meaning that it's a pretty solid recipe. You're going to see a lot of whole grains. You're going to see a lot of greens. You're going to see a lot of really nutrient-dense vegetables. So that would be my recommendation. I think Cathy's books have such beauty and flavor to them, and I think they would work also very well. Cathy, what do you have to say about that?
Well, yeah, I agree with the reversing heart disease. That was the very first book that I bought, well, as a matter of fact. So yeah, I'm trying to think of other cookbooks. Yeah, yeah, I don't have that particular one. Del Soufra, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name, but wonderful man as well. And that was an early cookbook that I bought way back when. And he has a number of wonderful recipes to boot. You're nodding as well, Char, so maybe you agree. Yeah, there's so many that are out there, but it's really not that it's a different way of cooking. If you're in a smaller space, you just are. It's actually a wonderful discipline because you really don't need a lot of stuff to cook healthfully, beautiful, whole food, plant-based dishes. You just need your knife, you need a pan, and not much else, and a pot. So you can do it in a very confined space. And my son, for example, who's in his 30s, eats this way as well. And he, along, now he's a professional, and he's doing better. But in his student days, he had very small living situations and teeny kitchens, and so you can make do. It's just you think about it in smaller quantities. You're making smaller amounts. You're freezing them and so forth. Just because you have storage constraints.
I have to agree with you. That was a great question, by the way, but I do think that a Ruby grad acting as a consultant in an extended or an adult living situation would probably be able to uh, entice or enhance the recipes and meal plan at that certain facility. That was a very good question, Gail. Thank you very, very much. This next question is from Anna Marie Troutman. And I do want to say for one quick second that if you follow us at Ruby Plants on Instagram, you can read all about Anne Marie's voyage into becoming plant-based and all of the wonderful things that she is doing. She's just a remarkable woman. Chef Fran and I have had the pleasure of meeting her in person at a book signing in suburban Philadelphia last October. So that was very nice. But do check out her story because it's a great story. So here's her question. She's saying hi to Chef Char and Chef Cathy. She's putting together a workshop for menopausal women. What would be the key message I could bring to the group? I have lots of ideas and I want to pare it down. Cathy, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I would check out Neil Bernard has I think his latest book, he's written many, many books, so I'm not 100% sure, but his latest book was about hormonal impacts of food on hormones and so forth. And he's done quite a lot of research, the Physicians Committee on menopause. And I'd say so I would check that out as well, because there are recipes in his books as well, and you might find that helpful. But the thing that pops into my mind first and foremost is, in addition to a nutrient dense, high fiber, low fat way of eating, is not to be, to debunk the fears and the myths around soy for menopause. For women going through menopause that have been, the old information that has now been completely debunked and discredited to make women afraid, and men for that matter, afraid of eating soy, whole soy. I'm not talking about highly processed soy, but, edamame, tofu, tempeh, soy milk. Eating these very beneficial foods can actually protect us from different cancers, and also, mitigate the hormonal impacts of hot flashes and all the rest of it that goes along with menopause. So that's what pops to my mind first and foremost.
Using Jane Esselstyn's book because she does focus on menopause for women, and as Cathy said, debunks many of the myths. And then the other thing is that if you were going to make a dessert, I would definitely go to Fran's book, which I believe you have. And Fran has very good, solid information in this book as well. Now it is 2:54 and we have several questions left. I'm going to just go down the roster here. And Anne-Marie, good luck with your event, and let us know when it is. And if it's on a day and time where I can hop on I-95, I will definitely be there in the front row. And the next question is, do you have any tips for cooking for one without wasting food in a very tiny kitchen with basically no counter space? I use a cutting board over my sink. Well, I think that what really helps if you have a small kitchen is to plan a weekly menu, a shopping list and a weekly menu, so you know exactly what you're going to have. And while you're busy chopping a bunch of onions and 3 of your recipes have onions that will be in them, is to get some good food storage containers so that you're not constantly bringing out your cutting board and putting it over your sink. You'll also save a lot of money that way. And I know that works for a lot of people. I live in a 100-year-old house. We had our kitchen redesigned a couple of years ago, and the kitchen is 10 by 10. So even though it looks like it has a lot of counter space in it, I have to kind of think that way of, being organized and getting a shopping list and not having a ton of food waste either. So I hope that that helps. The other thing is, what you might think as waste, you can put in a container in the freezer and use that if it's a vegetable or fruit for making a solid and delicious vegetable stock. This next question is for Cathy. As a young culinary professional, how can we effectively promote plant-based cuisine globally while simultaneously deepening our understanding of it? And this is from Blaise Lambert.
Well, I would just keep your finger on the thumb of what's going on in the culinary world. I mean, plant-based, as Char said, it's so different from 10 years ago when we were really very marginal and people didn't know what your heck you were talking about. And it was a hard sell. Now, unfortunately, it's like the other end of the spectrum where everybody has tried to co-opt the term plant-based, even if it doesn't mean plant-based anymore. In many circles, it's sort of plantish, with a lot of other even animal-based foods mixed into it. It's just sort of plant-friendly or so you have to really look through the weeds to stay true to what you want to do. But yeah, I would just try to support other chefs, see what they're doing, stay current. It depends what your interests are, what kind of cooking you like to do. Is it more desserts? Is it more cooking? Is it influenced by foreign or particular different cultural influences? If you're from a particular background, are you passionate about Mexican food or Japanese food, or see what your specialization is and then just keep learning. It keeps you inspired, it keeps you really stimulated, and then you can create it in your own unique fashion and put it forth as something unique and original of your own. That keeps me excited anyway.
That does sound exciting. We're going to finish up with these questions, and then we're going to embrace you with a warm gratitude here. But let me go on to the next question. I'm sorry. Somebody was speaking into my ear. This question is from Victoria W., who has a question about how to store onions and not keeping in the refrigerator. If you're whole food plant-based, you go through a lot of onions. If I buy a little mesh bag, they're gone by the end of the week. I just keep them out here. And if you're worried about the runaway skins, take them off, put them in your freezer. You can use them to make stock. They'll add some color. And I don't ever smell them. You only smell them when you cut them, and then their aromas sort of waft through the air. Let's see. Do you have anything to add to that, Cathy?
Nope. I mean, there are lots of ways to store onions, and we go through them, but mostly, just buy what you think you can use. So sometimes, it depends what your cooking habits are and what your time constraints are. Don't, in any given week, just plan things so that you don't have too much that can lead to that the onions would suffer, or any produce would suffer, and then it could lead to waste. So you want to just manage your time and your cooking and shopping needs.
I think those are good. And I have to say that sometimes I'm often tempted when I go to a produce outlet where you can get like 5,000 pounds of onions for a very cheap price. It might not end up being that economical in the long run if you're not going to use them or pre-prep them and then store them in the freezer or a container or wherever. This is from Diane K. I'm going to give this question to you. Cathy, and the question is, if you were making tea for friends, what would a go-to nosh be to serve with the tea?
Ooh, that is tempting. Um, well, it depends, of course, what the season is, because that might, I might make a little soup and some homemade crackers if it's this temperature that we're having in the Northeast right now, which is rather frigid. Um, my favorite tea that I've been really enjoying lately is a genmaicha. I don't know if you guys know what that is. It's a type of, it's Japanese, it's a green tea, but it's also includes toasted rice. So it has the most delectable aroma and flavor, and it really is distinctive. So I throw that out as just a tea possibility. Um, I like to make little crackers, but I also, if it was in the warmer seasons, one of my favorite things to do is just to make a little mousse out of chia seeds and soy milk, and I add just a tablespoon or so per cup of homemade yogurt, soy-based yogurt, which is a probiotic, and just leave it out to culture for a couple of hours. It becomes so dense and rich. It's really like mascarpone for anybody that with an Italian background, that it's just so delicious. And I might serve that with some roasted plums or other fruit that in a parfait, something along those lines.
Well, we will be right over. That sounds totally, totally delicious. Um, Second to the last question from Tony C. Tony, it's always nice to see you here. For a cookbook, is there a workaround if you have some of your recipe photos, but some you don't? My husband is also a photographer, and he suggested I just cook those meals that need to be photographed. This sounds like a very complex answer, but maybe Cathy, you can answer in a couple of, 90 seconds or something like that.
Geez, we didn't really have a chance to really talk about publishing too much, but really depends if you're interested in doing a cookbook. So many cookbooks are so visual right now because people really eat with their eyes, and sometimes people buy cookbooks just for the photographs. I don't even know if they cook the dishes half the time. But so I would encourage you to just, photograph away, entice your husband with some tasty meals, because it might help you attract an agent and ultimately a publisher. But of course, not every cookbook has a million photographs. So, there are differences. Plenty of them don't. So, it's certainly less expensive for a publisher to publish without the photography for every recipe. So, you might be able to succeed that way too. There's probably no single answer to that question.
I don't think there is a single answer. And I will say that I have purchased many books thinking, oh my gosh, look at these photos. And then at the end, read that they're stock photos from a certain place. And that the book that I'm speaking of was wildly popular. So I think it all depends on your
Wow.
budget and everything else. We have one last question. And Cathy, I'm going to put this in your ear that perhaps you can come back another time, because it looks as though a lot of people did have questions about book writing, about writing a proposal, how long the proposal takes, photography, recipe creation, and other things like that. And our last question is from Jennifer K. And Jennifer, this is such a good question. Where does one find liners for sheet pans? I can't find anything other than parchment paper, and I'd like to find something more permanent. So let me give you my spin on this. First of all, you should be using brown parchment paper and not the bleached parchment paper. Bleached parchment paper is a little bit better. And if you've ever spent a day in the kitchen with Ann Esselstyn, she uses her parchment paper twice. She'll flip it over and use it another time. So you can use it twice. You might want to look into using silicone sheet pan covers. They last forever. You can find them at Williams Sonoma. You can find them at any cooking store, Sur La Table, et cetera, et cetera. And oftentimes you can find them online at certain places. So those would be my suggestions, or looking into a good sheet pan like the Caraway that do not require any lining whatsoever. Kath, what say you about that?
Boy, I couldn't have said it any better. I used to use quite a bit of parchment paper. Now I almost entirely rely on silicone sheets, which I have accumulated over they work just as well, and they
Mhm,
are the most environmentally friendly thing because you can use them over and over. I think the
mhm,
only place for parchment that I turn to now is when I make a parchment bag. I just cooked
mhm,
fennel yesterday in a parchment bag, and there,
mhm.
you have to staple it closed and so forth. So you have no choice but to use paper. But I hardly ever do it anymore, only for that purpose, really.
Well, we covered a lot of ground in a relatively short period of time. I want to thank Cathy so much for visiting with us today and for sharing her wonderful experiences as a Rouxbe student, as a twice published book author. And, Cathy and I go way back, although we have never met face to face. So it was really fun to do this event. And I look forward to seeing everyone next month in February. Don't forget to check out our Rouxbe plants on Instagram, where you can see a lovely story about Anne Marie. And Cathy, do you have any closing remarks before we sign off?
No, I just want to thank you all for, Ruby and you in particular, Char, for the opportunity. This was so much fun. It's so good to see your face. You're near and dear to my heart. And to thank all the students and other folks that might have tuned in. I hope this has been helpful, and it was a lot of fun from my perspective.
Thank you so much. And don't forget, you can find this later today on YouTube. So we hope that you will subscribe to our YouTube channel and see the video later. And you can also look specifically at the question that you asked, and then you can see the answer if you needed to have a little bit more reinforcement. Cathy, Katin, thank you so much. Grazzini, thank you so much for coming. And from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, this is Char Nolan signing off, and keep on cooking.